It was an ordinary Thursday evening and my wife Joyce and I were in the kitchen preparing dinner, a dinner we often share in the kitchen. David, we've been married for almost 7 years and we've always been honest with each other, haven't we? What does it really mean that you've met someone? I asked, but I'm afraid I already know the answer. You like him, maybe a lot, I asked, my stomach turning. A guilty look swept across her face and she averted her gaze, nodding softly, yes, and suddenly my appetite disappeared, replaced by a sick feeling in my stomach, but I knew I had to continue the conversation. My voice was strained, and she could feel it too as her back was against the counter. We've had lunch together every day for weeks now, and last week we had dinner together, but that was because your business meeting ran late. She glanced at me and shook her head, not yet. I felt like I needed to sit down, so I grabbed a chair and sat in it. I don't want to hurt you, but I need to figure out what he means to me. I'm sorry, David. I know it hurts you and I hate it, but I promised him I'd be there. I can't sneak out without you knowing. We've always been honest with each other. Can I ask where you're going? I think he said he kept a sweet, big paycheck. He thinks highly of me. I'm sure he does. What time are you leaving tomorrow morning? You waited till the last second to tell me? Does he know you're married? Of course he knows. I wear my wedding ring all the time. Do me a favor, don't wear your wedding ring when you're in bed with him in Vegas. David, I talk about you a lot when I'm with him, and I'm sure you've said a lot of nice things about me to him, like that I'm a good guy, just like him, and that I'm a little bit tedious in bed, and not the best provider, and I'm prone to toenail crumbs in the carpet, and other little flaws, and those have pushed you away from him. And she looked shocked. You love me, but maybe you don't, is that it? No, I don't know. I'm confused. So you seek clarification in the arms of this nice guy who knows you're married but doesn't care. He's a hunter who sees a beautiful married woman and tries to conquer her. That's the real game, stealing a beautiful married woman and making her husband a cuckold. Is this nice guy your boss? No, he's my boss's boss. So you've really upgraded? Climbing the corporate ladder with labor and talent seems pointless when you can use your body to reach your goals. Let me ask you this, if I begged you not to go, if I got down on my knees and pleaded with you to stay with me, would you say yes? You can easily break the sacred vow you made to me 7 years ago, but you can't break your promise to Frank, is that it? I'm sorry, David, I don't want to hurt you, but I have to do this for myself, please understand me. I stood up and turned towards the basement door. Wait, I want to show you something, then I'll get out of your way and you can get ready for your trip. Joyce gave me a confused look when she saw me hauling the small wooden coffin I had been using for Halloween decorations up the stairs. She asked me what was going on. Just bear with me for a moment, we've been together for so long and I want to show you something before it's all over. It's a coffin, it's a cheap prop for Halloween, but it's still a coffin. Here's the lid, here's a hammer and some nails. Her expression became disturbed when I showed her the hammer and this. I held up the paper that I had taken out of the safe on the wall. It's our marriage license. I opened the lid of the coffin and put our marriage license in it and then closed the lid. David, what the hell are you doing? What are you talking about, David? This proves that we're married, and once you walk out that door tomorrow with Frank, it's no longer true. I picked up a nail and placed it on the lid of the coffin and nailed it in with a thud. Joyce was shocked. This was the first nail, symbolizing all those lunches and dinners you enjoyed with Frank, I said, and nailed another nail in the corner next to it. This was the second nail, representing all those passionate kisses you shared with him. Joyce's eyes widened and her mouth trembled. I put the third nail in the penultimate corner. This nail represents your agreement to go to Las Vegas for the weekend with Frank, the great and the good, I said, holding up the last nail and putting it in the fourth and final corner of the coffin. Joyce, tomorrow morning when you and Frank go to Las Vegas, that last nail will seal our marriage, and our life together will be irreversible. You can't be serious, can you, David? You can't abandon us for one flippant occasion. I'm not the one who abandoned our relationship, Joyce, you are. I've always loved you. You're the most beautiful and fascinating woman I've ever known, and I've climbed into the casket with our marriage certificate and buried it next to it, and to satisfy my curiosity, to drive the knife even deeper into my heart, let me ask, if I were to go through your luggage, would I find some lingerie and perhaps undergarments you bought just for this occasion? Joyce, I'd like to ask you, if I were to go through your luggage, would I find some lingerie and perhaps undergarments you bought just for this occasion, would I? Joyce didn't answer. The tears were streaming silently down her face, but her expression said it all, and that's what I think. I'm going now. I don't want to witness your final act of betrayal. I'll be back in a few weeks after you and Frank leave to pick up the things I'll need, although while you're in Vegas I suspect you'll be too busy warming up Frank's bed to worry about anything else, and you'd probably will want to think about what there is in the house that you would like to keep. I won't be here when you return, but my attorney will be in touch with me in the next week or two. I didn't know where I was going and I didn't care. I just wanted to get away because I knew I wouldn't be able to eat anything, and I found a Motel 6 a long way from the airport. My cell phone buzzed a few times and Joyce's name flashed on the caller ID, but I ignored it. I didn't want to hear her defense for giving up on what I had always thought was a good marriage. The next morning, I showered, put on the same clothes, and went to the nearest Denny's for coffee and toast, and as hard as I tried to push the thoughts of my choices aside, I found myself unable to shake them. I'd heard people describe the pain of being cheated on, but I'd never realized how completely devastating it could be. At 8:30, she asked me if I was feeling sick, and I answered in the affirmative, adding that I hoped to be back to business as usual by Monday. After hanging up, I noticed a string of missed calls and a dozen text messages from Joyce. I didn't delete them and didn't bother to read them. The last one and the incoming call both came at 7:45, so I assumed she'd given up on contacting me when she'd left to go be with Frank, the guy who stole my wife, and I refused to ever again label him a nice guy. He's far from nice, and retaliation against him was inevitable. I just needed the right moment to be discreet. Reality hit me hard when I pulled into the driveway and opened the garage door, and I saw that Joyce's car was gone. She dumped you. She found someone better, some guy who can take her to Vegas and treat her to expensive hotels. Wake up and move on. You may not find someone as charming as her, but you will. But you'll find the other half. Despite what I say, deep down, I try to believe that the house is disturbingly quiet. When I step inside I look at it through a hazy lens, like a man with a broken heart walking through the kitchen. I notice that the remnants of cheese and ham that I accidentally spilled on the floor are gone, and the casket is no longer on the table. I reminded myself that lust can cloud one's judgment. Walking up the stairs to the master bedroom, I pushed open the door and inside, the coffin sat at the foot of the bed, the lid partially lifted and a crowbar resting next to it. I think Joyce had gone to a lot of trouble to pry some of the nails loose. I muttered aloud and turned towards the dresser to get my underwear and socks, only to find 3 sets of beautifully made and expensive ladies' underwear sitting on the table by the window. The underwear had been torn to shreds, along with a pair of yellow Medgies. I yelled out, "I can't share what I don't own." I glanced back at the bed and realized that a similar note had been placed on the coffin with the same words written in black ink. A woman's voice screamed and I heard her footsteps rushing towards the stairs, followed by her stumbling and falling down the stairs. She had no makeup on, her hair was disheveled, her eyes were red and swollen, and she was wearing a Celtec sweatshirt, a pair of gray sweatpants, and a pair of fuzzy bunny slippers. He asked me why I wasn't ready to go to Vegas with him, and I repeated that I couldn't give him something that didn't belong to me, and he said what the hell did that mean, and I told him I couldn't go anywhere with him, would never go with him, would never speak to him again because I didn't belong to him. My body belonged only to my husband and I would never share it with anyone else. He called me a David, said I was a tease, said I wasted his airfare money and wasted his attractions. He threatened to ruin my reputation at work, called me a tease. Said he would get me fired, but I told him he wouldn't because I quit. He was so angry that when he drove away his tires screeched for a block and finally got to the roof of the building, and she wrapped her arms around my ankles and hugged holding my legs, and I was so ashamed, and she cried I had hurt the only person who had always loved me and would do anything for me. I had failed this man who meant everything to me and I was really sorry. And then she cried and she held me for a long time and it felt like an eternity, though it might have only been a few minutes, and I was so stunned that I couldn't move. She clung to my leg, sobbing uncontrollably, and every fiber of my being urged me to take her in my arms, to show her how deeply I loved her, and to reassure her that we would get through this difficult time together. I stood there and stared at the woman who had been my whole world until last night. I reached down and helped Joyce to her feet and we embraced until she had stabilized. I asked her to make some fresh coffee. I offered. "Thank you, David." "Oh, David," she whispered. "I think I may have damaged your car when I pulled into the driveway just now." "Yes, I heard you. We'll be talking about that too," I assured her. I assisted her back downstairs into the kitchen and we sip our coffee and ask, "What made you change your mind about last night?" You buried our marriage. What do you mean? You put our marriage license in that horrible coffin and sealed the lid after you left. I went upstairs to pack, but all I could think about was the sight of our marriage license trapped in that dark, horrible place where our marriage seemed to be over, like you buried it. It was in a place where there was no air, no light, it couldn't escape, and then I started thinking about all the wonderful things that the marriage license had brought us. And what it had meant to me, it meant that we were a team and that we were so happy when we were together, and I knew that I had to find a way to open the lid of the coffin and get our marriage license back and let it breathe again and let me breathe again. And she laughed softly and she said, I never realized how cleverly you hid your tools. It took me at least an hour to find the pry bar and half an hour to haul the coffin to the bedroom and pry the lid open enough to get our marriage license out. She giggled again and the sound warmed my soul. Just 2 seconds after you left and I knew I could never be far away with Frank or anyone else, and I felt so stupid and ashamed of myself. How could I treat the only man I ever loved the way I treated you? I tried calling you over and over and over and over again, but you wouldn't pick up, and then I started to text, but that didn't work either, and then I finally pried the lid off the casket. I wiped off all my makeup and put on your old Caltech sweatshirt and sweatpants, and my eyes were so red and swollen from crying, and I didn't know what Frank would think of me, the real me that you've always seen and still love. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known, Joyce, and even now you look perfect to me. And when I realized that, I knew I had to do everything in my power to win you back, to make you love me again. But when I realized that you were the only man I've ever loved, I had to do everything in my power to make you love me again. But when I did, I had to do everything in my power to make you love me again, and I did it. I knew I had to do everything I could to win you back and make you fall in love with me again. But when I started unpacking, I came across the panties and bras that I'd bought on my trip with Frank, and I broke down again, and suddenly, just looking at them made me sick, and they were the last expression of my betrayal of you, and I had to destroy them. So I took a pair of scissors and I ripped them all apart, and they cost me a lot of money, but I couldn't stand to look at them, and I destroyed them just like I thought I'd destroyed you and our marriage. And it says on it that Joyce Russell is the most beautiful woman Joyce has ever known. It says Joyce Russell and David Campbell were married on June 12, 2005 in the presence of my maid of honor and your best man. But when I look at it, it all comes back to me. We stood in front of all of our family and friends and gave ourselves to each other, and we vowed to be faithful till death do us part. What you've shared has given me a lot to think about. Do you think we're going to make it through this? I'm not sure, Joyce. I hope so, but right now I'm not sure. You almost broke me last night. I've never experienced pain like that. I feel so betrayed, so alone, so helpless. Can you imagine? The person you love the most, the one you've always trusted, has chosen someone else over you. Her tears are welling up in her eyes again. I want you to be alive and healthy, and more than anything I want to be able to trust you again. Luckily it's not that hard because, as you said, we've always been honest. Even last night you told me how you felt about it, how I felt about it. David, I'm not sure it's too soon now. We don't need to do anything, David. I just want to feel you next to me, where it belongs, only to you. Her dark eyes pleaded with me so earnestly, I couldn't resist. Okay, but don't joke about it, choose. I'm still angry with you. A small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Anything you say, darling, she replied while crossing her heart, taking my arm and leading me upstairs to her room. Absolutely no kidding. She eventually resigned, and when her boss and HR asked her why, she embarrassedly told them that she needed to put it behind her. And not surprisingly, HR told her that Frank, who seemed like a nice enough guy, had 3 harassment complaints, and in short, he lost his job, and Joyce was allowed to keep her job and was even given a large sum of money. She stayed with the company for about 6 months as we found out we were about to become parents. Life goes on, and sometimes you have to give a person a second chance to right or wrong, even though most people will disagree with me. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please consider bookmarking and subscribing. And if you haven't already done so, please feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below.